just how firmly committed they are to the Constitution, and to the democratic republic, and to the process of peaceful transition of power, and be able to cast their vote either for saying that the president's behavior is completely unacceptable, to join with all of the technology companies and tech platforms and the PGA who are going to not use his clubs, golf clubs anymore, the Wall Street Journal, even Republican senators like Toomey and others are coming out. They should have the opportunity to record their vote for posterity as to where they stand. And I think that's important as well. But we've got to send a message that there are consequences. This is unacceptable behavior, and we want the president out because we can't trust that he would not do something that could threaten members of Congress, the vice president, anybody else, or the process of the peaceful transition of power. They should have the opportunity to do that, and they will. And we'll see where they stand.
Thank you.
We're going to Ryan Nobles from CNN next.
Congressman, can you hear me? Oh,
yeah.
Here we go.
You're fine.
Two questions for you. First, if you could maybe expand a little bit on the phone call that you had with the chief of the National Guard, and in particular, was he able to offer any clarity on the conversations between he and the chief of the Capitol Police? Because it seems to be a lot of confusion between the two of them as to whether or not they were in a position to be called up, whether they were not in a position to be called up. Based on what you've seen from the interviews that the Capitol Police chief has given compared to your phone conversation, do you feel like you have any clarity as to exactly how everything went down on that day? And then I have a follow-up when you're done.
Not yet. I didn't speak to the chief of the DC National Guard. This was the chief of the National Guard Bureau, which is kind of the umbrella group for all of the state National Guards. He wasn't brought in until later in the day, evidently, when they started talking about going outside of DC with additional help from additional states. So he was brought in, it's my understanding that he was brought in a little bit later, and so didn't have a whole lot of information as to the back and forth between the chief and the DC National Guard, between the chief and the sergeant at arms and all of those other conversations. So we've got some work to do to try to really tease that out, and we're in the process of getting that information. But those are all going to be very key conversations. Again, the lag in the chief's original request, as he stated, and that the Department of Army stated, and then the time frame, the lag between when even the DC National Guard was able to get there, and then the original 340 that were activated, and then later the full 1,100. The lag time was just completely inadequate, and we need that's what we're trying to learn from this, is like, how do we cut through that? And in part, it's going to be to have a lot more National Guardsmen on the ground to be able to act quickly, to support, and if needed, and they'll be around for that, so that mistake won't be made again. We're going to make sure that.
Okay, and then to follow up, there does seem to also be some confusion as to the guidance Capitol Police were given as to the use of lethal force. Have you gotten any insight into that? And then extending it out to the inauguration and beyond, is that going to be an emphasis in the planning and the security of the inauguration to make clear when lethal force is acceptable and exactly the type of lethal force that can be used?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a background in law enforcement. My job is to ask the right questions, and I believe that we have been asking the right questions. And so what we're understanding is they have, especially the National Guard, they have rules on the use of force. And those rules basically start with and lead with de-escalation. And then it evolves into something that looks a lot like self-protection and self-defense, and then moves on to defending others who may be in jeopardy, and then it moves on to deadly force at some point. And I want to make sure, and I said this very clearly on the conversation this afternoon with the National Guard, that there needs to be absolute clarity that if a mob starts pushing through a gate or pushing through a checkpoint, what are the responsibilities of that National Guardsman? Now they are there to monitor and shore up. It is the police officers and police departments and others in law enforcement that would actually be charged with, dealing with that particular situation. But again, and I said earlier on TV that there's a lot of Americans saying, why wasn't anyone shot? Why weren't there warning shots? Because clearly it had moved past any possibility of de-escalation, and clearly lives were being put at risk. People were already getting trampled. Cops were getting squeezed in the doors. The mob rule had taken over. So I just want to, not necessarily for my purposes, but I figure if they got to explain it to me, everyone else is going to know about it. What are those levels? And we're not just talking about securing a building. We're talking about securing a building in which the electors and the elections are being certified. This is the machinery of our democracy that would be interrupted. And so does that aspect play into how they should respond? So it's not just a normal interaction where you can go through those rules of engagement or rules for the use of force, but there's an inauguration, and Vice President Biden has got to make his way to the White House at some point. Now, clearly there's not going to be a parade or anything this year, but I just want to make sure I'm asking all of those questions as well as you're asking those questions as well, and that we get real answers about them. So that's basically what we're trying to do to make sure that everybody knows that business is going to get taken care of. And I'm not here to be a tough guy, but I am here to say, if you're messing with this process, if you want to try to attempt to kill and members of Congress or anything like that, then you need to be handled accordingly.
Great.
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate it.
The next question goes to George Nelson from the Business Journal.
Hey, George.
Congressman, how are you doing this afternoon? Thanks for talking to us. One real quick question, then something on the National Guard. First, were you contained with the Congresswoman who tested positive for the coronavirus, or were you sheltering with the Congresswoman who had tested positive for the coronavirus?
I was in that room for a period of time. I don't remember seeing her, so I don't think I was necessarily close enough. And I'm going to get a test tomorrow just to be sure.
Now, as far as the National Guard, how far out are they reaching for National Guard troops, and how concerned, or what issues does that bring up, considering that we're hearing reports today that there are demonstrations planned in all 50 state capitals leading up to and on Inauguration Day?
Yeah, well, there are, I believe, over 300,000+ National Guard members throughout the country. It may be more than that. We can get you the specifics on that. But there's adequate numbers to protect, state capitals and other things, as well as, lend, members to come to Washington, D.C. I think all 50 states are engaged. I know that the National Guard Bureau had a call, I think yesterday or the day before, with all 50 states. As I said, the states are being very generous with whatever support that we would need, but they also have things in their own state. But I think they're more than they have more than adequate force power to be able to take care of all of those issues. It may, as I said, it may interrupt some of the stuff that's happening with the vaccine, in the vaccine distribution. Every state's doing this differently, but in many states, the National Guard are involved in some capacity in trying to facilitate this. And from what I'm hearing, that may be affected a little bit.
Next question's from Caitlin Emma from Politico.
Hi, Congressman. Thank you so much for taking my question. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Earlier, I know you said there is no evidence, you don't have any direct evidence of a quote unquote, inside job, and, 2 officers have been suspended. It sounds like 1 has possibly been arrested. That's a little unclear. My colleagues are hearing that as many as 15 incidences with Capitol Police officers are currently under investigation. Is that also what you're hearing? And do you have any idea of what the nature of those instances are? I mean, is it that they're helping the rioters in those cases, or is it maybe more general than that?
Yeah, I have not heard. I have heard that there are a number of investigations about that, about 10 to 15, but have no clue as to the level of investigation that's going on. The most important part in this, for our purposes, I think here today, are to know that the interim chief is taking aggressive action within the department to find out if there was any facilitation or help. And that's important for everybody to know, because I think there are a lot of people that are worried about that, given some of the videos. And we have every right to ask those questions. No one needs to feel bad about asking those questions. And we need to get to the bottom of it. And I think that from what I can see, at least at this point, from the visibility I have right now, is that the chief and the heads up, leaders, I guess, of the department are looking into that.
Next question goes to Justin Dennis from Honing Matters.
Hey, Congressman, thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
Yep.
You earlier mentioned transparency issues with the Capitol Police as part of your committee work. Is there anything looking back at your recent work that now you may have more context about what happened January 6th? And also, do you know if authorities identified or been reviewing platforms where it appears others are planning more hostilities next week? Can you share anything you're learning from looking at where these posts are happening?
Yeah, appreciate that. Nothing on the transparency issue, that I think we can't find out that we maybe would have known beforehand. Like I said, we've had multiple chair people of a variety of different committees talk to the chief, talk to the sergeant at arms, and we're just given assurances that didn't turn out to be accurate. So we were having communication with them. So to be determined, I guess, if we could have known something back then. Most of the issues around transparency with the Capitol Police have been on particular incidences that they had over the years that we were trying to institute some reforms that we were able to get through the House version of the bill that got stripped out by the Senate. And so we're going to continue to push some of those reforms. And what was the second question?
Let me pull Justin
Sorry.
back here.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Thank you. The other question was have you been learning anything from these platforms where others appear to be coordinating more hostilities for next week? You've been looking at those. Can you share anything?
Yeah. I don't have anything more than you probably know or see, or that your friends are texting you or emailing to you, or that you see on social media. And obviously there's a lot to be concerned about, and all of this information, clearly it's open source information. It's making its way to the FBI and the Secret Service, and they see it as well. And so that's what ends up driving a lot of the numbers of about exactly how many guardsmen we need and how many states need to be involved, and all of that is being driven by what's happening with the intel. But a lot of it, again, is open sourced, and we're seeing it and we're concerned about it, and we're gonna adequately address it.
Next question goes to Niv Ellis from The Hill.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you doing this. I wanted to ask, Mayor Muriel Bowser of DC has basically told people to stay away from the inauguration, to participate in it virtually. Do you share that view that people should avoid attending the inauguration?
I mean, I don't see any reason why you should come. To me, it's an event that obviously with COVID and everything else, we were planning on having a much more reduced inaugural. So just for that reason alone, I would recommend that people stay at home. But there's really, given all of the activity in the last week and all of the activity that seems to be planned for the coming days, I don't see any real reason to show up. And I think that it would provide law enforcement a clear picture of who's there if the crowd numbers are reduced. Provide for more clarity, reduction in confusion, for them to be able to have some visibility as to what they're dealing with. So I would certainly recommend staying home. And I know there's not a whole lot of tickets. I still get people texting me, "Hey, can I get 8 inaugural tickets?" And I'm like, no, you can't. There not going to be a lot of tickets, so there's not going to be a big crowd there at all. And I think we need to take the advice of the law enforcement, which I think is probably the same advice that the mayor's given.
Next up, we have Danielle with WFMJ.
Hi, Congressman Danielle Cotterman here.
Hi, Danielle.
Kind of 2 questions. First, you mentioned the need for and plans already being discussed to have a significant number of National Guardsmen at the inauguration. Now, just before this call, I happened to give the press person for Ohio's National Guard a call, and she said at this point, Ohio's National Guard had not been contacted to be involved in DC or even to provide any services at the state capitol. Is that surprising to you? Is that something that maybe should be taking place, or are we just getting these troops from other states?
Yeah, well, basically what they do, because it's most convenient, is to tap into the region surrounding the area where you would need the National Guard. So that would be East Coast, going even up into New Jersey and New York, which can provide an ample number of guardsmen. So I think my understanding is there was a call with everybody. Not everybody was actually activating people to come down to DC. There's a significant number, I will tell you, that have been activated and that are either in DC or on their way to DC from those surrounding states. And if we need more, then you'll see the Ohios and Kentuckys and moving further south into maybe North and South Carolina, getting tapped into to bring people in. And that's usually the process that they use. And I think for our purposes here, that enough can be generated from the surrounding region. As far as the state goes, I mean, I don't know what the threats are or concerns are within the state, but that would be under the governor's jurisdiction, and he would need to make that call based on the intelligence that they're getting.
Okay, thank you. And then just kind of the second question is just as we change administrations, any updates on the next step in stimulus and the student loan moratorium set to expire? Does that need to be extended?
I believe from what I'm hearing that the vice president is going to extend the issue around student loans. We could also do that through legislation. Now with the Georgia Senate races put to bed, we will be able to generate another stimulus package, which would include that. I'm certain of it, and probably include some state and local money that is desperately needed by many of the states, and continue the process with the vaccine and the distribution and other public health needs around testing. I think those will be the building blocks. My hope as well is that we get into some hazard pay for some of these frontline workers that have been exhausted over the past few months, that we can pony up some money to say thank you for all the risk that you incurred over the past few months. So that I think that's coming, and I hope that not too far after that we are into an infrastructure bill where we can put $1.5 or $2 trillion of serious investment into rebuilding the United States and to rebuilding both the public infrastructure, public parks, our downtowns, our water, our sewer, just have a significant impact in the country, as well as broadband. So I hope that's coming as well, right on the heels of any new stimulus package.
Thank you.
Next question is for Jay from WKSU. Jay?
Jay?
All right, we can move on. Next question is for Yulon from CNBC.
Hi, thanks so much for doing this, Congressman. You mentioned now, I think twice, that the deployment of National Guard to help with the security around inauguration and security around other state capitals could be detracting from the vaccination effort. Can you talk a little bit about what specifically you might have heard and the concerns you have around that?
Yeah, it was just kind of mentioned in passing today, but basically the chief of the National Guard Bureau was articulating the roles and responsibilities of these men and women in the states that they serve, and that included vaccine distribution and also protecting state assets as well, like state capitals. And so they were making sure that their the homeland, the state security was taken care of, and then offering in some instances help and support for DC. Every state's different as to how they utilize the National Guard, but from what they were saying is that the vaccine issue would be affected by this. So that's just food for thought about the ripple effect happening, because of what we're dealing with in Washington.
Next question goes to Beth Reinhart from the Washington Post. Okay, we're gonna move to.
Hi, I'm sorry.
There you go.
Can you hear me? Okay, Congressman, can you address, thank you for, as others have said, for doing this, we really appreciate it. Can you address the congressional oversight of the Capitol Police? Has it been rigorous enough? Do members need to be asking tougher questions, insisting on more transparency, not just suggesting it?
Yeah, 1,000%. The police, Capitol Police, is run by a board, and so the conversations now that myself and Zoe Lofgren and Rosa DeLaura and I think others are having are about really making sure that we're able to provide the level of oversight that we need for the Capitol Police, and those are ongoing discussions. I think any review that's going to be happening about January 6th is going to take into account a broader understanding around oversight and what needs to be done as we begin to build the force of the future. We do believe that we're going to have to make a lot of changes around, the structures of the buildings, the perimeters, the roles and responsibilities around the Capitol Police, and all of that is going to entail us having more oversight for them. And I think there's going to be bipartisan agreement on this, and that'll be a part of any future package. I can assure you that.
Thank you so much.
Next question goes to Emily Wilkins from Bloomberg Government.
Hey, Congressman, thanks so much for doing this. Just wanted to have a quick question. As a lot of the investigations by Congress get underway, is there any sort of particular timeline as to when various committees and panels and investigations need to wrap up by and when clear action needs to be taken by?
Well, the key, as I said, is how do we get through the inauguration? That's got to be key. That's got to be our focus now. Not to diminish what happened on January 6th, but like I said, pulling any elements of the data that we need from what happened on January 6th to be able to be applied to us doing a better job for the inauguration is going to be key. And at the same time, getting through the inauguration, securing the inauguration, having a strategy moving forward around the Capitol complex. But I think, the oversight piece, I think, will start relatively quickly. Once we get moving, we'll probably have some conversations this week. I think there'll be talk about structure. Is there going to be a special committee? Is there going to be how exactly is this going to look? That, of course, will be determined by the Speaker and the majority leader in the Senate. It will be a bicameral committee. What's it look like? But that's already in the works, and we should have some structure of how this will be handled. Outside experts that we would need to bring in, best practices around the country and around the world around security for different parliaments and around the world who may have a lot more threats than we do. How do they handle it? So there'll be a lot of research being done about it, and that's going to start relatively quickly, but probably in earnest once we get through the inauguration.
Jay from WKSU is asking, if the House passes a new article of impeachment and the Senate decides not to resume the session until January 19th, would the House proceed with the second impeachment trial after President Trump is already out of office?
Well, it sounds like that may be the only option. We're clearly, the clock's ticking. My hope, as I stated before, was the 25th Amendment, that Vice President Pence would have the courage to enact the process, to begin the process of the 25th Amendment. I think it's becoming clear he does not. My second hope is that Republicans, primarily in the Senate, would have the courage to one, band together and maybe go to Donald Trump, like what happened to Nixon, and tell him he's got to go or he's going to get convicted in the Senate. It's looking more and more like there's not enough courage in the Senate, in the Republican caucus, to be able to do that. So the next option is we pass it, do what Mr. Clyburn mentioned, and that's have a period of time where we allow Joe Biden to begin his administration, especially around the vaccine and the distribution, the testing, and the economy, to be able to move swiftly in the first 100 days around these very key issues that he talked about during the campaign, that he has a very skilled team in place to be able to address these issues. And he should have the time to do that. And then then the Senate can then deal with the impeachment. And again, why? Trump's out of office, and there'll be a lot of people saying, hey, let's just sweep it under the rug. We cannot, as members of Congress, set a precedent that a president of the United States can foment an insurrection with, national terrorists here, domestic terrorists here in our country, to try to storm the Capitol in order to overturn a legal election and allow that to happen without any repercussions at all. That is a terrible precedent for the Congress to start. It's a co-equal branch. Article 1 is the first article of the Constitution, and that creates the Congress. It creates the people's house. And the whole foundation of the country was to break free from a king, from a monarchy where the power was centralized. And then the king had ultimate power and ultimate authority. And that's why the United States was born. So to have a president move backwards, reminds us of why this country originally came into being. And it was to move away from power coming from above, but God giving power to the people and the people giving it to the government to self-govern. And President Trump, what he's done over the past few weeks, and especially on January 6th, was to try to undermine that basic principle that we have in this country. And so for the Congress to stand idly by and allow him to do that without any repercussions, even if maybe the consequences aren't as timely as we want, we have to begin to articulate why and the fact that there has to be consequences. And when you have the PGA Tour stripping him from hosting any PGA officially sanctioned events, pulling one from one of his clubs in 2022. When you have every major tech platform banning him, the president of the United States, not a 16-year-old teenager, but the president of the United States. When the Wall Street Journal, some Republican senators, we've got to take a stand, and it may be uncomfortable and it may be inconvenient and it may not be as timely as we'd like, but I agree that it has to happen, and I'll be supporting it.
Next question goes to George with E&E News. Okay, we don't have him. Next goes to George Nelson. He has a follow-up.
The hometown newspaper gets the follow-up. Go ahead, George.
Hey, Congressman, I just wanted a comment from you regarding the reports that have just come out about the acting Homeland Security Secretary, Chad Wolf, stepping down. What impact does this have, especially given, again, we're now 9 days out from a major national security event?
Yeah, I hadn't heard that if it just happened. Again, I don't know the reasons for it, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was maybe being asked to do something that he didn't want to do. That wouldn't be exactly a news flash coming from this administration. So I'd have to look more into it. But the Homeland Security is a big part of what's going to happen here in the coming days. I'm sure that there'll be a level of cohesion and balance efforts between them and the other law enforcement agencies. So I'll have to look into it. But my hope is that won't affect the planning. And if he was being asked to do some things that he didn't think were appropriate or right, then it may be even more beneficial that he steps aside and allows us to understand better what he was being asked to do, and maybe he can share that with the American people.
We're going to go back to George with E&E News.
Thanks, Congressman, for taking the time out to do this. We appreciate it. I wanted to ask you about the Park Police. Specifically, what role will your review take in looking at the Park Police? I asked because the Park Police had a major role in the Black Lives Matter protests in trying to quell them, but they didn't seem to have much of a presence on the mall and going up to the Capitol the other day. And I was wondering if that was a concern of yours or something you were going to look at.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes, same here. I have the same question and questions that you have because the Park Police was brought up in that January 5th conversation that I had with the Sergeant at Arms and the Chief. I will check with Chairwoman Lofgren and others to see if they were also mentioned, but they were specifically mentioned in that conversation that I had that they would be available for backup. And, we didn't see much involvement on January 6th. So we're going to have to look into that as well. And again, lots of questions and we're going to make sure we find all the answers.
Great. Thank you.
Great. That's all the time we have today. You can follow Congressman Tim Ryan at Rep Tim Ryan on Twitter for more updates. That's at Rep Tim Ryan. And I'm going to send out a recording of this to every reporter who's on the call. It'll go out to our list. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Sorry. I've literally been on this call for an hour. And I was, yeah. So he was announcing stuff that the park that. Well, yeah. He said 10 to 15 people in the investigated.